It's good to see so many familiar faces, also some new faces as well. So guys, obviously this is a very interesting time that we're in right now. It's very new for everyone, especially all athletes. To be really specific, this occurred, I would say, as early as March 11th in the world of sports. I remember even in March, which was 12th in the morning, I had several morning sessions scheduled with clients online, and they were both college students. So 9 a.m. shows up, and one of my students is missing. And this is a student who's, who's an athlete who's always there. And I try calling, no answer. 10 a.m. shows up, another one of my athletes is not there. And sadly, I get a call and I get a text from them saying, our programs have just been canceled. Our season has actually been suspended. And, from there, it was just, it was quick and things happened fast. And, from there, of course, the organizations all shut down. I believe it was the PGA Tour that shut down, one of the fastest, the earliest, or the latest, I should say, out of all the sports organizations, but it started with the NBA. And here we are. What I'm trying to get at today is I want to be able to help you guys in any way possible to really understand what is the goals in this situation. How can you keep getting better, right? I think the goal is to be able to get better, especially when there's no competition, when there's no way to even train properly. And of course, still staying safe at the same time. I will say, which is really with a heavy heart, that today, for the first time, this whole coronavirus affected me on a very personal level. One of my clients' fathers just passed away today, actually last night, after 20 days of being in the hospital. So it is real. It is real, and he was a very, very great man who was healthy, had no pre-existing conditions that I knew of. So this is something serious, and we definitely need to be aware of it, be smart, and we will get through it 100%. So, today I'm going to give you guys the best I can. This is not something I want in terms of any economic backing or any sales. I'm not doing any of that today. A lot of you guys already know who I am. You've worked with me and my company. Very blessed to have you guys here. So, I want to share my screen for a little bit. We're going to go in and out of that. For everyone who's on, who is watching on either, in fact, let me actually tune this in right now, either Facebook or Instagram, you can also join in on the Zoom as well. That there's also a link. If you go to the Instagram page, you can actually find it. It's there on the home page. So that's another option as well if you guys are interested in actually joining in, because you're going to be able to see the screen, and that's just more helpful. So if you guys are interested in that, please go to the home page for Sports Mental Training on Instagram. Click on that link so you can join in on Zoom, so you can see everything in front of you while we're talking. Okay, so let's take a look here. All right, I have that going. All right. At the end, guys, we're going to also have, of course, a Q&A. We're going to be able to discuss everything in more detail. I may even be able to bring some of you guys on board if you want to discuss different topics. So I want to talk about really what's happening. First off, before even starting, you guys can just kind of give me an idea what sport you guys play, participate in. Just kind of type that in if it's Instagram. If it is, of course, Zoom, you can type that in chat. Just want to get a little idea. And how many of you guys are athletes, parents, coaches. Definitely want to take a look at that. Awesome. Yeah, it's great to see so many of you guys I work with and have worked with. It's really great to see you guys. That's awesome. Very cool. I'm glad you guys can make it. I know some of you guys even have school I spoke of. So you're kind of, playing a little hooky on your online classes, but that's okay. Very cool. Awesome. Anytime. Absolutely. Very cool. All right, guys. That's awesome to see. Okay. So, let's talk about really what is the enemy of productivity. Right now, a lot of people are saying, well, it's the virus, right? The virus is holding us back from training. It's holding us back from competing, to resuming competition, our goals. But it's not, And then the second idea is, is it fear and worry, right? Well, fear and worry is a symptom of the problem right now. It's a symptom of the struggle. But it's not that at all. The actual enemy is our response. And right now, you know, a lot of people are just responding in ways that are not effective, they're not productive, they're kind of at a standstill. And we want to look at how we respond in a way that's going to produce success. So first off, one of the biggest mistakes many athletes are currently making is searching for ways in their mind to stop the worry, right? And I think we're all culprits of this at some point in our lives, whether it's in sports or in our personal lives. Now, let's just take a look at this. Is there any luck in stopping the worry with your thoughts? Just think about this for a moment. Most likely not, right? And the other thing we know through science is that stopping thoughts is near impossible. So just the act of trying to do so most likely is not going to help. Now, third, when left on autopilot, our brain will continue to search for certainty or distractions. Right? So that's the other thing we're going to talk about is, you know, where has your mind been going to distract yourself from all of this? So here are some examples. You know, if you guys have fallen into this, by all means, you can agree with me here. One, watching more of the news, right? We're more in touch with what's going on. Also engaging in more social media discussions and posts. So, you know, trying to learn as much as we can to make sure we're safe or those who we love are safe. And then there's the distractions, right? Binge watching on Netflix. You know, some of you younger guys have video games. And the phone is also a part of it. So if you think the phone isn't, it is a huge, huge distraction, which sometimes is productive and oftentimes is counterproductive. So what we're going to do throughout this whole webinar is I also want you guys to get a little involved in writing some of this stuff down, because it's going to be very helpful as we go through this. So just write down a few examples of how you've been responding to your worries. You know, think about it more behaviorally of the things you've been doing, and also cognitively, meaning your thoughts. Like, how have your thoughts been changing? So just take a look at that. Definitely write those down. Thanks, guys, for joining on Instagram. Also, if you have any questions to Instagram, please post those as well. Definitely take a look at that. Next, we want to be aware when our mind is searching for distractions to deal with the anxiety and worry. So remember, the use of distractions, it's important. It only strengthens the belief that thoughts can be dangerous. So think about that. When we're looking for a distraction, we are strengthening that fear. Now, thoughts are not dangerous, right? But what is dangerous is a lack of positive action. And that's what we want to work on. We want to understand what kind of actions can we take to be productive, right? To be able to set ourselves up to be successful. Also, what small actions can you start taking now to better yourself and your family, right? Write that down too. This is not just about sports, obviously. It's a much bigger factor than that. Now, stopping worry is, of course, not the answer. And in many ways, it's not possible at all to stop worry. The solution is actually to develop success habits. Okay, how do we respond to worry? Let's look at some of these success habits. Let's develop these together. So number one, we want to acknowledge that now is an opportunity. It is not a problem. We've had many, many crises throughout the world. I would say this is the first one in sports history that we'll go into, at least in the modern era. But we've had many struggles in our personal lives and on a larger scale. And we have to look at how we get better. So I'm going to go through a few little quotes here and how they apply. First off, where focus goes, energy flows, right? So what we know is that focusing is a choice, right? We can choose to focus on the problem or the opportunity. And I promise you, whatever you're focusing on more will show itself each day. So that's another thing you may want to write down, is write down exactly what have you been thinking about, what have you been focusing on. Has it led to productivity? Has it led to more contraction in your lives, more fear, more reactivity? And then the two biggest factors that motivate athletes and individuals are fears and dreams. What's amazing is that when it comes to self-behavior, a lot of times us as individuals, we tend to naturally gravitate towards the fear. But when we're looking for help, we look at the dream. So one technique I want to just discuss briefly on this level is, in terms of our self-talk, we want to make sure that we are feeding ourselves solutions, positive talk, how we're getting better, right? Solutions of how we're going to better our lives and better others each day, even if it's something very, very small. Now, this is the big part of why we're here. I want to share with everyone several routines that everyone can apply in their lives to make a difference. And first off, let's just go through fitness. Now, I'm not going to spend that much time on fitness because I think everyone talks about fitness, and that's not really the particular area. What I want to highlight briefly here is how do we increase productivity with fitness? Right, so we do want to incorporate into our daily routine, but here's where many people struggle. Many athletes struggle because we fall into the trap of idealizing. Okay, so we will idealize how we should train. And a lot of it's based on memories, right? It's based on past behavior. Well, you know what? I used to train, Patrick, when I had the gym and it was open, or, you know, the tennis courts or the golf course or, you know, the soccer field, that was all available to me, but now I can't, right? Or I had that track I could train at. Well, that's true. That's not there. But if we idealize things, then the problem with that is it leads to two big areas. First, it leads to procrastination, right? Most likely, if we're going to idealize, we're not going to get started, right? And that's the other thing, too. We won't get anything done at all. We're going to say, you know what? I'm going to wait until tomorrow. I'll wait until I hear word. Well, if you wait, then other people are doing things and they're getting better while you're staying the same. And as Roger Federer mentioned in a really good interview, he said, you know what? Staying the same is going backwards because the other people are always looking to get better and they're moving forwards. So here's the solution. The solution is to commit to what is called a good enough approach, right? Good enough, not idealizing, especially now in these times. It's about what is good enough to move forward. Now, here's an example of ideal. You guys all have your examples, but here's one. It says running 3 miles in under X amount of time. Well, a lot of you athletes I work with are pretty good endurance athletes. You know your fitness goals and you've had them and you're structured and steady with them. And this would be an ideal goal, but maybe now because things have changed so much, we go to good enough. And good enough is getting off the couch, right? Putting your shoes on and walking out the door. Right? Just getting out there and getting started. And it's amazing what happens once we face the present and our mind is out of the future and creating in our mind, we're actually facing it, that things just happen. A lot of times the biggest fears occur before we face the problem or the challenge. Now, the second routine I want to focus on is simulating pressure. I would say this is one of the most important areas here for you guys. This is the first time in modern sports history where every sports organization in the United States and possibly the world, I'm not sure, but possibly the world is closed and for good reason. And now many competitive athletes all over the world are no longer training under pressure, right? So we're talking about everyone, right? So a lot of the athletes I work with, especially the ones, even the ones I'm speaking with right now who are listening and tuning in, a lot of the struggles in the mind is, hey, well, you know what? These athletes have trained way more than me. They're competing way more than me. Well, guess what? Right now, they're on the same boat, right? They're not competing. And it's interesting what we see in research, what it does to the mind when we get away from competition for a while. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But right now, this is a huge opportunity for everyone here to find ways to successfully simulate pressure. To simulate pressure, that sounds really tough, right? A lot of you guys thinking, well, Patrick, my competition is not going right now. I don't have anyone to compete against. I can't go out there and play because of the lockdown. But let's look at some creative ways in doing so. So first, let's look at 2 scenarios, okay? Because remember, this is a choice. Scenario number 1 is returning to competition after being away for 6 months or more and not facing pressure in that time. Right? So how will everyone feel? Think about that for a moment. If you're not facing pressure, right, and you go 6 months, maybe you're doing a little bit of fitness, but you're not facing that, how are you going to feel when you have to return or when you return? Most likely, as you see that picture there, like a fish out of water. Also, what kind of thoughts and feelings will you face days and hours before competition? Right? Think about that. Write that down. It's better to get to know those thoughts and feelings now than to wait until it happens. That's when panic sets in, right? We're trying to avoid things. We got to face it right now. So really, really face those thoughts. And everyone already knows that, right? You know your thoughts, your fears, and just write those down. It's just kind of compound what that would feel like 6 months from now. Hopefully it doesn't have to be 6 months from now. Just giving you that example. Also, what kind of thoughts and feelings will you experience during competition? Let's get more specific, right? Let's imagine that now you're out there competing. The early stages, the middle, the end, depending on who you're playing against, which team you're up against, which opponents, the conditions, right? Who's watching. Write those down. How is that going to affect you when you haven't faced competition for a while? Now, these are just some symptoms here. Most likely, you're going to experience more doubt, right? More uncertainty, less confidence, increase in nerves, pressure. Not to mention, you're going to struggle with enjoying it, being happy, right? To go out there and experience joy. So let's look at just 2 examples. You guys can think of others as well. These are just 2, this is the second example. I'm jumping the gun here. Second scenario to imagine. Returning to competition after training your mind under simulated pressure situations and then facing other athletes and teams who have not in 6 months. Now think about that, right? Visit that, write that down. Imagine now you're training your mind daily or weekly in pressure situations, and you go out there and everyone else, now think about their levels are higher than you maybe, right? Their ranking may be higher than you, the teams may be better, but now imagine that they haven't faced that. How will you feel then, right? What will be different about your thoughts, your confidence, your decision making? So, how do we simulate pressure in a non-competitive environment? I think that's a big question, right? How do we do this? Well, first we have to acknowledge what our fears are. Everyone has different fears, and I want you to write down what they are. Now, I'm going to be very upfront with this. There are 2 types of fears. There's the rational fear, which is kind of the lie. That's like saying, hey, I'm afraid I'm going to lose. And a lot of people say, I'm afraid I'm going to lose. That is, it's a fear, but it's most likely not the reason why you get nervous. Right? We have to look at what are called irrational fears. And those irrational fears in many cases are called social fears. Okay, social fears are the key components that hold the majority of athletes back. In fact, social fears are the fears that I help 95% of all my athletes with. So some examples here would be the fear of embarrassment. Some of you guys are like afraid that when you go out there that you're not going to play as well as you can, and a lot of those athletes are going to be, they may laugh at you, right? They may say things to you. Now notice how irrational that is. Most likely it won't happen, but our mind goes in that direction. Secondly, there's the fear of disappointment. All right, this is a big one. So write that down too. Even if it's personal, if you have parents with you, you can write that alone. But who are you afraid of letting down? Now remember, this is also irrational, right? You could have coaches, parents who love you, who are very positive. But when it comes time to perform, it's the fear of seeing them not happy, right? Having to hear from them some disappointing comment. Third, rejection. This is a pretty big fear, right? Being rejected, like, oh, the team's not going to want me anymore. Coach is not going to play me. That's a big one too for a lot of you guys. And then guilt. Guilt is another deeper level, and that kind of goes into disappointment too, right? But the guilt is another big one. So definitely write down some of those. We need to identify them. That's going to be important in this next step. We want to identify them now. Like I said, the key is to identify them now, not wait until everything's passed and it's the last minute. Now you got to face it. That's the worst. That's when athletes go into panic. So you have months to face it now and then go through these routines I'm going to teach everyone. All right, let's talk about it now. Let's go into just a few techniques here, a few ways of facing or creating pressure. First, create time limits. Okay, you can create time limits in some of your sports. Some of yours you can't. Even in fitness, you can create time limits, right? Because a lot of us, we can't even compete, but we can do fitness at home. We can do it in our backyard. We can do it there. And when you do that, you add a timer. Okay, you can add a shot clock. Let's say, for example, a basketball player. But you want to challenge yourself to compete or complete specific tasks under a specific time frame. Right? Write that down before you start so you have that in front of you. Now, of course, you may be thinking, hey, but that's not really pressure, right? It is, but it's not the social pressures. Well, I haven't added another component to it. We're going to add one more. You definitely for this to work, you want to add a consequence, right? You have to keep yourself accountable. And if you want, you can have what's called an accountability partner or accountability buddy. Have someone there who you know who is going to make sure and keep you aligned that you're going to do it. Even me when I was working with even sales teams, right? We needed accountability buddies to make sure that, a lot of sales professionals were going after their target goals throughout each month, because knowing they had that, they felt more online to make sure that they were always able to come through, right? They didn't let the fear or the restlessness overtake them. So here's one example. You must make 10 free throws in 60 seconds or do 20 burpees, right? Just one example of many. But definitely write this down, your own fitness goals, depending on what sport. I saw a lot of your sports there. Write it down, but make sure also that the timed routines that you're going to set for you are useful, so they are beneficial to your sport, right? You don't want to commit to something that's completely irrelevant, that's not going to help you. But you want to get comfortable with that, right? What I'm teaching everyone here as well is how to attack pressure, right? The natural tendencies of the brain is avoidance, right? We call it avoidance coping. We're trying to stay away from the fear. All right, here's the second routine. This is a big one for a lot of you. I know I work with a lot of, especially adolescents, so teenage athletes. Virtually invite people to watch you train and engage in drills, right? And specifically, invite people who you care about to watch you train and engage. Okay, so here are some ways of doing so. FaceTime, right? You can. A lot of people have iPhones, may not be FaceTime, maybe it's another OS system, operating system, but FaceTime would be one example. You put that on there, you have it there with maybe teammates or some friends or coaches, and you put it there and you go to work. Now going into the next level of this, Instagram Live, right? This is what I'm also using right now. If you put it on Instagram Live, all of a sudden you've just invited your social world to see you compete, to see you train, right? And it is very scary for many, many athletes. It's scary, but think about why this is important. It's important because this is the same fear that's triggered when you go out there to compete under pressure. It is the same, right? For example, a golfer isn't going out there and they're afraid because they're going to shoot a high score. No, they're afraid because other people are going to see that, and maybe they have a past memory of how they're supposed to play in practice. And because they know them from that experience, they don't want to disappoint them. That would be one example, right? So you want to get comfortable with this aspect. This is so important. Another big part of it too, as I mentioned here, is you can make a public announcement on your Instagram when you will be training, right? Put a post, hey, you know what, tomorrow at 1 p.m., I'm going to be live and I'm going to be working on this. So here's the goal. I want to be very clear about this. Athletes who I see are online now who have already worked with me, you know that I am all about making sure that you go out there and you train and you compete and you play 100% for you, right? So this is a key part. For this to work, you're not allowed to check any comments. This is not about checking comments. It's not about looking to see who's watching. I mean, you could do that if you want, but you don't want to see comments. And the reason why is because I want everyone here to be getting better at focusing on themselves while others are watching, playing for themselves, training for themselves, right? Because what happens with a lot of athletes and why they struggle emotionally with fear is because they also are looking for approval or they're looking for validation. So to overcome pressure, you must engage in daily routines that attack your social fears instead of social routines that avoid them. Right? So avoidance is bad. We don't grow when we avoid. That's why, going back to that ideal versus good enough, we want to attack these areas. So another thing I want you guys to write down one other way you can add pressure to your training. Get creative with this. Think of maybe another solution, another way that will really be helpful. All right, the third routine, visualization. This is very powerful. A lot of you already do this. A lot of athletes I worked with have already trained you guys on this in quite a bit of detail. But definitely incorporate it. Now is the time more than ever. Incorporate 10 minutes of visualization, ideally in the morning. And this isn't just about sports, by the way, but you want to visualize your confidence each day. You want to visualize your attitude going into it. Visualize your self-talk, right? What are you telling yourself? Productivity is key. How productive do you want to be today? Visualize that as well. Visualize success, right? And here's a big one for many of you. Visualize discomfort tolerance, right? Now, what does that mean? Well, I'll give you a great example. Yesterday evening, I went for a run. I've been running a lot every evening. It also helps with the mind. And, you know, one of my knees has been hurting for a little bit. So I knew when I was going to get out there, my knee would be feeling some soreness, right? I'd be feeling some pain, some discomfort. I took about 5 minutes, not even 10, just 5 minutes to visualize that discomfort, right? Visualize it, visualize embracing it, actually visualize enjoying it. Sounds really weird, I'm saying that, right? But visualize welcoming it. That's the key, right? And visualize it in detail. And sure enough, I go for a run. Guess what came with me? That discomfort and that pain. So it didn't go away, but it was desensitized. It was welcomed. The anxiety, meaning the anticipation of the pain, was gone, right? Instead, it was just a part of my training. And within 10 minutes, I barely felt it. I was barely aware of it because that had already been resolved in the mind, right? So that's another key part when you visualize. Visualize the things that you don't like, that you may not look forward to that day, but visualize not only getting through it, but visualize in a way of making it your friend, right? This is something here that's helpful. Here's another key part I don't have in this presentation, but I just want to really highlight for everyone. Right now is a very important time to be aware of your future self, right? Your future self is that version that is after this is all over, right? That future self could be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 1 year from now, but visualize that future self and visualize what he or she is going to be like based on the decisions that you're going to make right now, right? Visualize your future self thanking you for those decisions, thanking you for that investment, okay, or sacrifice. I don't like using sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice, it's an investment, right? It's helpful for you. Now, visualization is also key for habit building, okay, because anxiety creates avoidance behaviors. Okay, we know that. If we're feeling anxious, we're going to most likely avoid those situations. That's just an innate response of the brain. Now, athletes must visualize productive and successful responses to rehardwire the brain by forming and strengthening neural pathways. Neural pathways are key components to skill mastery, to repetition, right? When we repeat a skill over and over again, we are strengthening neural pathways in our brain, meaning that now whatever we are engaging in, that skill is becoming easier. It's like learning a language. If you learn in the beginning, you are strengthening new neural pathways in the brain, but at first it's not very strong, right? So we have to go over it. We have to keep repeating it and speaking and making mistakes, but it gets easier and easier until it becomes very fluid, very subconscious. So therefore, creating new future responses to anxious feelings is the goal. Now, this also equates to better emotional responses and increased productivity. What does that mean? It means, okay, you're visualizing not just performing well, but in this particular situation, you are visualizing feeling good, feeling confident. You know, you're visualizing emotionally staying positive. You know, you're visualizing the self-talk. So all of that right there is actually strengthening, and we say layering another response with your limbic system, your emotional region, so that when you go out there under pressure, guess what? Your response isn't fear, it isn't avoidance. Your response now is, hey, you know what? This is good for me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm appreciative. I'm grateful. I can't wait for the next pressure situation. Another key component you can do when you guys visualize, because like I said, I know it's tough that we can't go out there and actually use the facilities. You can shadow what you visualize, right? There's a lot of research for many years now that really highlights the importance of shadowing our imagination, right? Shadowing imagery. And what that means is when you shadow, you are creating the movement while you're imagining it, right? So if it is a tennis player, you know, they are shadowing their backhand while they're imagining good feelings, right? While they're imagining a good response. Same thing with, you know, a baseball player. If he's working on a pitcher, right, hitting his spots, he is shadowing everything while he's doing this, while he's imagining it. Now, let's look briefly at this part here. I want to discuss another key part that I did mention before we started, is, I do want to give some tips for parents, right? And this also applies for athletes. So let's just look at another question here. How much power does everyone give their thoughts? Right? Think about that for a moment. How much power do you give your thoughts? And the second question would be, do they keep you up at night, right? This is something that has a lot of power over you. Do they make you feel less adequate? I know a lot of people, not just athletes, but even coaches, they are in this state right now where they don't know what to do. And you see them doing erratic things every day, things they just, it's like everything came to a standstill. A lot of successful people are very type A. So because of that, they feel less adequate, like they should be doing something. Well, understand, like, how are those thoughts playing a role right now on the way you feel, on your mental health? Also, do they take away much of your joy throughout the day, right? Are these thoughts robbing you of your happiness? Now, you want to focus on helping, this is for parents, focus on helping your athletes develop world-class athletes, right? Focus on helping your athletes develop world-class habits. Now here's why. I just want to really emphasize this. There's a lot of emphasis on motivation, right? Motivation, passion. These are all incredible things. I mean, look, I work a lot with that with my athletes. I'm able to help a lot of them get into a place where they're highly motivated, highly passionate on what they do, and drive that more. But in situations like we're in right now, where we feel very restricted, it's important to focus on habits, right? Because motivation is a part of the emotional region of the brain, right? It's based on mood. Now, habits are not based on mood. That is a separate region of the brain. That's the basal ganglia, right? The basal ganglia has to do with repetition. It's an automatic part of the brain that's there. In fact, we have habits ingrained that are so ingrained that we can do those things without even thinking, right? And we're just doing these habits every day. So we want to develop success habits so we can train that part of the brain. So one success habit as parents you guys can focus on is emphasizing health. Right? Better health, hygiene, what you're eating, your sleeping habits, right? What are their go-tos for anxiety, for stress as well? Productivity is big. This is a key right now for everyone. Productivity is huge, but don't do it because you feel like you need to do it, right? Doing it has to have meaning behind it. Third, mindset, right? We have to work on our belief system right now. A lot of times, whatever we are focusing on, that is going to become a part of it. There's a lot of research on that shows how a lot of short-term memory comes from our short-term experiences, recent experiences. So, for example, if you read a book today or you watched a TV show today, most likely that's what you're going to talk about in your next conversation because that was there, very vivid. So we have to make sure that we're always ingraining and feeding our mind with things that are going to help strengthen our belief system in the future. The other big parts for parents is working on kind of the trifecta, self-control. Okay, we want to improve that. We also want to improve willpower. And we want to improve what's called delay of gratification. That's also for athletes. Delay of gratification, I talk a lot about that with my athletes. It means how long you can go before you give up or before you take a shortcut or quit. Motivation requires a balance in mood. As I mentioned, habit simply requires repetition over an extended period of time. By the way, when you start habits, start with something very small. If you feel like it's too much, you're putting too much pressure on yourself, start extremely small. Like I said with that example, just putting your shoes on and going outside for a run, that's a great place to start. Now, let's look at what research says briefly about habits. Habits on average take 66 days to form. 66 days, that's roughly over 2 months. So how many of those weeks, or how many weeks do you think you'll be out of competition? Right, as athletes right now, write that down. Look, no guess is wrong at this point, obviously. We can look back in the future, but right now we don't know. Just write down more or less, how many weeks do you think it's going to take before your organizations open up and now you're able to resume competition? All right, is it 5 weeks, 10 weeks, 20 weeks? Well, what do you think that is? And just write that down. And then next to it, put 66 days and think, hey, that's slightly a little more than, was that 2 months? So a little more, let's say 9 weeks. And that's really not too bad. So imagine all the success, all the accomplishments you can make in that short period of time. Now, also write this down. What habits would you like your children to develop? And you as athletes as well. Write down what habits would you like to develop? And you guys can take on anything. By the way, you can even learn a language. I learned, for example, Spanish in 2 months, although it was hardcore. I learned that. I would not recommend that unless you really want to do that. But, anything can be done if you really, really push yourself and you just do it and you want to do it, right? Because it has to also align with your values. What do you see and how do you want to better yourself and better the world? All right, so developing habits is the goal, not developing motivation at this time. I promise you the motivation will come with great habits. What we know through science is that motivation is developed through hard work, right? But we can start small. Small work then comes into hard work. So I love this statement here. It says, today I will do what others won't so that tomorrow I can do what others can't. And that's really the motto I want everyone to go through right now every day. So, okay, today I'm going to commit to one thing that others will not commit to, right? Because it's too hard, too uncomfortable, just not that important. So that later, and when I say later, once competition resumes, you're going to be able to do things that other people can't do, right? Other athletes cannot do because they didn't put in that work. You see here, for those of you who are on Zoom right now joining in, you can see my screen and you can see that quote there by Stephen Curry. And he said, I want to practice to the point where it's almost uncomfortable how fast you shoot. So so that in a game, things kind of slow down, right? So I want to practice to the point where it's almost uncomfortable how fast you shoot. So in the game, things kind of slow down. Well, that's a really cool goal, right? Now imagine doing that, putting that on something like Instagram Live or whatever, and then people can judge you and you feel all that pressure, but you're still doing it every single day. And then when you go out there and it matters, you know what? It's not going to affect your fear system of your brain. It's not going to affect your emotional system because you've done it every day. If anything, you're going to welcome it while others try to avoid it, right? That's the key. A great example, remember I mentioned earlier today about how this in a way is not the first time that athletes have faced something like this. If you see this picture here in the middle for you guys who are on Zoom, you'll see that is a young Jeremy Lin. For those of you who, of course, from basketball, probably know who Jeremy Lin is. Jeremy Lin was a very talented basketball player who graduated from Harvard, but he was not taken too seriously in the NBA in his early years. And he had several chances to make it. He was brought up to play, and he even came first to Golden State. He didn't do very well, got sent down. And in 2011-2012 season in the NBA, there was a strike or an NBA lockout that occurred. And I believe it occurred for about 5 months. And for 5 months, Jeremy took that as an opportunity to work on his game. And he worked on his game like he had never worked on it before, while the NBA was pretty much at standstill. They were not playing. They were waiting for the courts to decide. It was based on their salary. And every single day, Jeremy was out there training, getting better. And sure enough, that paid off. And that's really the attitude and the mindset that everyone needs to have right now is, what are you going to do? What's going to be your story, right? You're writing your own story right now. This is your time. Long story short, Jeremy got his chance. He got his chance in New York Knicks. First game, he actually showed up. He didn't do well. And he came back and he said, look, I know this is my last chance. But he had put in the work, and that work just took over on autopilot. After that, he ended up scoring, I believe it was over 25 points or 27 points that game, and it kept snowballing over and over. Ended up getting signed by the Knicks, later signed by the Rockets, the Houston Rockets, and the rest is history. So it's really creating the perfect time, right? A lot of us, we think, when is the perfect time? We're waiting for it, but now is the time to create it, right? So think about how you want to create your time. How are you going to create your routines every single day? So let's go through some question answers. Before I do, I just want to share a couple things for everyone who's on Zoom. This is some information here for those of you who are interested in learning more. You can follow me. You can also contact me through the email. If you're also interested in training your mind during these tough times, I am working with athletes still. I've been really helping them a lot through this. We're able to really get a lot of productive things done right now and really get their mind in a position to be successful for when the season resumes. That's the key, right? You don't want to fall behind. You want to be ahead always. In addition to that, it's also about academics. It can be about career. I mean, we look at everything. When it comes to sports psychology, it's not just sport psychology. It is performance psychology, right? So anything in life that you want to be able to have an edge to create a better life, that's what we focus on. So I'm going to get out of this right now with sharing the screen. And as I mentioned, I really want to spend a good amount of time here answering questions. So right now, if any of you guys have any questions, please feel free to send them. I believe you can send them on the Q&A you'll see at the bottom. I'm still kind of new to this as well. Now I can see all your responses here. It's pretty cool. All right, that's awesome to see you guys here. So yeah, send some questions if you like. You can go to Q&A down at the bottom, or maybe even chat. But I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Also, if you want, maybe I can even bring you guys in to talk. If you don't feel, if you want to, that's fine too. So any questions here before we move on? Believe me, you don't have to be shy here because you know, no one's going to see you at all on this. All right, so while we're waiting for some of that, I do want to highlight a couple other things here that are important. There are 4 reasons why we worry. Okay, so why do people worry? And we just want to really highlight that so you guys can be aware of it. First reason why people and athletes worry is due to genetics. I hate to say that, but it is genetics. You'll see, for example, when a baby is born, a lot of times babies will have different responses, right? You'll see some babies who are crying when they're born, others who are quiet. So it can be, and we know it is partially due to genetics, but that's not really positive news for everyone, right? Because we don't really have control of that. So the second reason why we have worry is due to stress. Okay, so we know that when stress goes up, it really activates the limbic system. It makes it what we would say hot. The hot regions of the limbic system, meaning that now when we're under stress, more likely we're going to worry. We're going to be irrational. The third reason why we worry is due to triggers. Okay, so triggers are early events that occur to us that really set us in this predisposition to stress. Okay, so for example, some people have gone through things as a child like divorce. You know, if your parents divorced, then there's a fear sometimes of disappointment more than others. There could be another one such as abuse or abandonment when they're young. So if anything happened to you, and it doesn't even have to be that serious, to be honest, but any of those things happen, we are more susceptible to worry. The fourth is values. Okay, values is super important. Values has to do, and this actually has to go with choking, by the way. So a lot of you guys are familiar with choking. I know I was as an athlete. Values has to do with how much something matters to you. So for example, when you go into competing, when you go back to your tournaments or your competitions or your games and you go back out there to compete, if you value that a lot right now, so if you're like, hey, you know what, I'm really worried about falling behind, most likely what research shows that when you return to competition, you're going to underperform. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but this is what happens. It occurs with things that we care the most about. So I'll give you a good example for many of you who are in your high school or play college or even professional. When someone's watching and there's some important relevance to your life, so let's say it's a college coach that shows up, most likely you feel more pressure to do well because you care more about what they think, right? They're the decision maker in that example. So your values are higher in that situation, right? Now, here's the great thing about values. Values is something that we can all work on. And the way we work on is we first have to write down and understand, well, how do we identify with these values, right? How do we identify with failure? How do we identify with not reaching our goals? And we have to understand that if our values are aligned with self-worth, which means how we feel about ourselves as a person, then most likely that's not a good, healthy relationship with the sport. That is really, really going to hurt. It's going to hurt the joy of the sport. It's going to feel like we're always chasing something. So that's the other thing. Let's understand and let's create healthy values with what we're doing. right? Like the sport and performance should always be about how do you better yourself. Okay, it should always be about how it's something intrinsic, right? Like, why do you play the sport? Why do you love it? Why are you going to go out there and work hard? It shouldn't be because of a finish line or because of a destination. It should be about, hey, you know what? I want to be the best. Like most of the athletes I work with, when they are thriving at the highest level of their game, it's because they're like, hey, you know what? I want to be the best I possibly can. I want to be the best in my in the world. Even I want to be the best in the state. I want to be the best. Period. And that's an awesome value, right? If it's because I want to prove to someone or something, you're going to go out there and you're going to be a nervous wreck. So the key right now is to identify your values and start working on changing those values. Now, I want to answer some other questions here. Now I'm getting some good questions. Yeah, so one great question. Everyone we compete against is in the same boat. They can't play. How can we still get an edge so we're more prepared than they are when we get back to competition? Well, you get, kind of like what I spoke about in the whole presentation, right? You get that edge by the work you put in each day. Think about it like compound interest, right? You start one day and you start doing visualization. You start doing your fitness. You work on adding pressure situations. Now you do the second day, and that's 2 days in a row, right? 3 days, and before it starts compounding. It's very similar to when you just go running. Like there's a thing called baseline training where a runner always starts very slow but for long distances. And then their aerobic capacity, their physical nature gets better and better. And it's not something you can buy, right? It takes a good 6 months for an athlete to train at a world-class level to go into, for example, an Ironman, right? They'll say, hey, if you don't have 6 months, you shouldn't even try to train for it. It's the same thing mentally. Right now, this is kind of your Ironman. You can work on your mental game every single day, and it will compound. And what I mean by compound is it starts slow, right? It starts slow, and then after 2, 3, 4 weeks, it builds bigger and bigger and bigger. That is your edge. That is definitely your edge in understanding that others are not doing that. Another great question here. Do you have any tips, recommendations for eliminating distractions during this time? Yes, absolutely. I'll tell you what I tell a lot of my athletes. Take your phone, take your TV, take that stuff and turn it off, right? Have even a box. I like to call it the distraction box. Take your phone for a certain amount of hours. Put that thing away. You guys have apps you're constantly on. A lot of times these apps are addictive apps because the programmers of these apps have designed them to increase dopamine levels in our brain so that we feel good, right? And we don't have it for a while. We start feeling anxious and restless. Well, do your brain a favor, and if you want, delete those apps from your phone. I'm not saying delete the actual account, but delete the apps and start doing that and do a brain cleanse. That's a really important thing to eliminate distractions. Allow your body, allow your mind to really face the restlessness, right? Because that's what we do. If we are distracted, it means we're running away from whatever we have to face. A lot of times it's an escape, not always, but a lot of times it's escape. You talked about how long it takes an athlete until they cut corners or take shortcuts. What was the call again? And can you explain it again, please? Okay. So many athletes, and this isn't just athletes, it's human nature. We love shortcuts. We love a quick fix solution. We absolutely love to get that win right away, to lower our scoring average, to be able to score more points, throw more strikes, whatever that is. And the key is that actually drives more anxiety, but also what it does is it makes us less resilient emotionally for tough times, right? If we're always looking for a shortcut, then emotionally we're going to be more fragile. So if we experience a loss or a setback, it's going to hit us more. So for parents, when you guys are working on helping your athletes delay gratification, what it means that you're not giving them that reward right away. You're making them earn it, and it may be for a while, but you're doing that because you want to teach them how to deal with that struggle, deal with that restlessness. And that's really a key part of it. That's another great question there. So those are some of the big parts. I have another question here. Yeah, so what thoughts on meditation? Meditation is incredibly important. especially mindfulness meditation. I teach a lot with my athletes. Mindfulness meditation is the ability to detach from your thoughts. So a big struggle with many, many athletes and just people in general is that we tend to kind of be victims of our thoughts, right? We kind of are controlled by our thoughts. If our thought is there, and especially like a thought that is fixated, meaning it's kind of clung to us, it's important, there's value to it, we tend to feed that thought, right? And it grows and it kind of has more power over us. So with meditation, it's the ability to learn how to quiet your mind. It's one way, there's many ways, but it's one way to quiet the mind by learning how to detach from negative thoughts or overthinking. I like to tell my athletes, give the example of, having so you have a balloon in your hand, and that balloon, let's say, is filled with a lot of your worries, a lot of your doubts, and and this balloon, let's say it's even from the movie It, right? Just a joke, but this balloon, you can't pop it, you can't get rid of these worries and thoughts. But the only way you can start to heal is by deciding to let go of that balloon and not grab it again, right? Just kind of let it go and let it go, and the more okay you are with that, the balloon starts to ascend higher and higher, and as a result, it starts to lose its power over you, right? Until eventually that balloon is out of sight, right? So meditation helps with that, so that we are not fighting our thoughts. We're not trying to force a certain mood, a certain feeling. We start to develop that ability. That's a great question. Any other questions anyone may have here? Yeah, different ways to silence the mind. So yeah, one of the other key ways of silencing the mind, this will probably take a lot of detail to go into, but a lot of our mind, the activity is intrusive, which means a lot of times we have intrusive thoughts, which are just automatic thoughts. Big struggle many of us have, and unknowingly, is we have this notion or this idea that if we have a negative thought, we're supposed to get rid of it, right? We're supposed to just throw it out, discard it. And the reality is this: everyone is going to have negative thoughts. It is impossible to stop negative thinking or stop thinking at all. And one reason why is because our negative thoughts serve us for survival, right? So if we didn't have negative thoughts, we most likely wouldn't survive some of these things. Can you imagine, like, if no one had negative thoughts right now, they would all be out doing whatever and they wouldn't care, right? So it's a good thing we have negative thoughts. The second reason why we have negative thoughts is because negative thoughts also serve with creativity. So, if we take the example of, let's say, the first Apple computer, right? The first Apple computer wasn't much at all, right? It was very basic. I mean, it was completely dated compared to what we have now, right? But if we didn't have intrusive negative thoughts, then creativity would not promote the ideas to keep going to make it better, right? So in that way, negative thoughts promotes innovation. And think about how that also applies with, with what you guys are doing right now, right? Use your negative thoughts to create innovation with how you're going to train given these circumstances, how you're going to get better. Don't use them against you, right? If we use negative thoughts against and say, oh man, let's look at limitations, let's look at contraction, then we're not going to get better, right? So there are positive reasons why we have that. So it's not necessarily about, hey, you got to completely silence the mind, but understanding that. The other way we silence the mind is by learning how to process our emotions. So processing emotions means, instead of running away from them, we have to face them. And when we face them and invite them, that's when we start to heal. That's something we work a lot with in my program too. How do you heal through facing those fears? Those are all great questions. If you guys have any other questions? I'll see a lot of you guys here. It's so great to see you guys here with me. Definitely wish you guys the best. Like I said earlier today, it's a very tough time. It is real. Like I said, it just became real to me what's happening in the world based on a parent who's very close to me years ago, who just passed last night. And I wish his daughter and their family all the best. It was really, really hard. And he was healthy. He was, I think, early 60s, but nothing wrong. If you knew him, he's the healthiest person, really, really good person. So, you want to be safe with that and, be smart, promote that. But, if you guys enjoy this, please let me know. I definitely would like to do more in the future. I like to be as helpful as I can any way possible. I have a couple more questions here, sorry. So, yeah, those are really good questions. Yeah, so just briefly, and is asked about values again. You have to understand why you're doing something. What is driving you to become the best? What is driving you to be the best in your sport, right? To be successful. And your values have to be aligned. A lot of times, it has to be aligned with something healthy, right? Like if someone says, hey, I want to be the best, that's a healthy value. If someone says, I want this because it's the only thing I have that I identify with, then we have to understand that in a healthier way, because that's not going to help you reach that goal, right? So there has to be something there that's for you, that's intrinsic, that's meaningful, that's healthy. That's the key with values to be successful, right? So for example, what I do in my career, I love helping my athletes, absolutely love helping parents. I have a passion for that. I will sit here all day if I have to answer questions, because that's a passion I have, right? That's the value. And of course, there are byproducts of having those values, right? But the value is that's intrinsic, right? And we have another question here. How do you balance spending more time with family during this time while trying to get an edge, which requires time? Yeah, well, that's another good question, James. Truth is that there's this it's arguable that balance is not possible. The whole notion of trying to find balance in life is what creates a lot of imbalance, right? It's what creates a lot of anxiety. So what I like, and this is not my idea, by the way, but I like using a method called counterbalance, being able to go extreme on both sides. So you go one side with family, and let's say you can only be with family for 2 hours that day. Well, when you're with your family for 2 hours, you are really with your family, right? You put your phone away, you put everything as a distraction away, and you're there and you're present with them, right? You're not trying to manage other emails, whatever that is, right? When you're in sports, you're there with sports, right? You're not there on the phone or anything else. And that's how you get the most out of it. That's really the key. Is counterbalance means you're going extreme in one direction, all in, and you go all in the other way. That's something I've had to also apply in my life too, being busy, is to counterbalance that between family and work. And it works really well. And lastly, how would someone start working with you in the current situation? Yeah, so in the current situation right now, I have a program that's set up which obviously it's great because we don't need to meet in person, so everyone's safe and healthy. And we work on the specific needs that every athlete has. So we start with an evaluation. That's the first session, and from there we identify what your mental strengths are, weaknesses, what's triggering the different struggles, and then from there we customize a program to your needs. And that's really key. So that means that every athlete is receiving a program that's specific for them, and that is geared towards your goals, but also whatever those setbacks are, to better yourself not only in sports but of course in life. And the best way to do so, as I mentioned earlier, is just definitely feel free to send an email, info@gospmi.com. You can also send a message on Instagram for those of you on Instagram, or you can even call. The website is gospmi.com. So it's GOSP as in Patrick, M as in Mike, I.com, and from there to learn more. But that's really the best way. You want to train your mind to be ready to really achieve your goals, to go after it, to I always say to athletes to really give yourself the ability to reach your full potential, whatever that may be. I know as an athlete, I struggled a lot with performance anxiety, especially when I was in college, where I could do great in practice, but I'd play in competition and all of a sudden my body would tighten up, my mind would go somewhere else, and it was the worst feeling in the world. So it is the ability to learn how do you strengthen the mind. So when you go out there, you can see what it's like to perform at the level that you're capable of performing. So in practice, of course, most athletes perform better in practice. Being able to see that transition is key, and I think that's why we all train, right? It's very frustrating to practice at a certain level and then compete and you're here, right? That's very frustrating. And what's the goal for many athletes? Well, let me train harder, and that usually doesn't work. So that's really the key. But anyways, guys, I really, really appreciate all your questions. They're excellent. I appreciate your time. It's awesome to see everyone. Honestly, it feels great to see everyone here. Everyone's doing well. Everyone's healthy. And, God bless everyone. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help. Try to do more of these. Please follow me on Instagram. If you have Instagram, it's at Sports Mental Training. In fact, I'll put that here so everyone can see that. So you can follow me on Sports Mental Training. I'm going to start uploading a lot of videos every week, or different videos. If you have any questions, you can also feel free to email, or if you'd like to learn more to start the program, I will be offering also a special discount for this tough time for this month. But please ask me if you have any of that too as well, any questions. Definitely am here to help everyone. All right, so have a great day. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.